coronavirus cases doubling roughly every 2 to 3 days.
Every day it was just like, what is going on? You're seeing the results coming out of New York and how it's kind of creeping now up to the northeast, the Boston area.
In the interim, Boston hospitals are preparing, as best they can, for an unknown number of COVID-19 patients.
It was like nothing I've ever seen before, coming into the city every day, driving around the city and just seeing nobody.
Pressure on frontline healthcare workers is already intensifying, even though the surge of COVID-19 cases has not hit yet.
One of the major concerns at the time was the prospect of our healthcare institutions in the city becoming overwhelmed, in particular the ICUs.
And now a field hospital is getting ready to open in Boston. Governor Baker announcing today that crews are setting up 1,000 beds inside the Boston Convention and Exhibition Center.
It's being called Boston Hope Medical Center.
As soon as I got the call that I was going to be part of this project and part of this team, the first thing that was going through my mind was, how are we going to make this happen? We really needed experts from every area. So we needed medical experts, we needed construction experts. We had to build a hospital from scratch in just a couple of days. We didn't have a lot of time, and we needed to come up with a plan.
The first meeting that we were a part of, we sat down and looked at the initial plans and how it was going to be laid out. And then we were asked to go to the convention center to take a look at it to make sure that the plan would fit and it made sense.
The first walkthrough was extremely eye-opening. Every single team was represented at that walkthrough. Medical compliance, HVAC, the BCEC, Suffolk, Mass General Brigham, and all the various doctors that were involved at that point.
The BCEC is basically one big massive space, and if you walk in, it's this enormous volume of area that's 100 feet tall. It's 3 football fields long. When we were there and we kind of looked and saw how the convention center was built and how some of the utility connections were laid out, it lended itself to be a perfect field hospital because everything we needed from a utility connection, electric and plumbing, was right there on the floor, ready to go.
We had to move fast, but we had to be smart about it. Came up with this whole concept of making these prefab panels standard sizes, 8 by 8, right? It's 2 sheets of drywall.
In hindsight, that was a critical decision because you're not building a 1,000-bed field hospital in 6 days without having a good chunk of it prefab, and those walls were key.
The build started on a Saturday morning. Got out there bright and early in the morning. Prefab panels just started coming in trailer after trailer.
We had massive crews of upwards of 300 people working around the clock. We had carpenters, builders, pipe fitters, electricians, teamsters, plumbers, really every trade that you could imagine to make this build.
We were all over every square inch of that building. There was one person on our team that had walked 21 miles in a day.
Beds are still on the way, but construction crews are busy raising temporary walls. Mayor Marty Walsh says the field hospital inside the BCEC will give other frontline hospitals breathing space.
The way they build in the convention center is different than how we build out on our projects. But everybody was reacting to things in the moment. It's not like one of our projects where you have a set of drawings, you have a schedule, and a plan that you've thought about for months to execute on. We were making it up as we go.
We were there originally to do the 500 beds, and it was about our second day into the build. And one of my bosses came over and said, hey, it's coming tomorrow, but we're gonna have to do another 500. Called our prefab guys up in New Hampshire and told them to make some more panels.
So probably the greatest example of how things were ever changing was the day they came to us and said we need to add oxygen to 100 of the beds. On a typical hospital campus, there's an oxygen tank farm with several massive tanks of oxygen that are just ready to tap into to supply oxygen throughout the hospital. The one challenge we had was finding tanks in the middle of a pandemic because not only the country but the rest of the world is trying to find oxygen for this respiratory disease. We were able to find a company in Texas. The tank showed up, we got them off the flatbed, connected them about a day, and that's how that came together.
We're really careful to make sure we were covering all of our bases. We wanted to make sure that we weren't leaving any stones unturned, that we were attending to every detail to make sure that the space was going to be ready not only for the build out, but for patients to come in about a week later.
The state's largest field hospital is now open. The Boston Convention and Expo Center is now being called Boston Hope.
There are 1,000 beds, more than 50 nursing stations, a half dozen short-term urgent care stations, and a physical therapy suite.
This was a massive undertaking, and it's remarkable to see it come to fruition in just 5 or 6 days.
To have started the build on a Saturday and to be accepting patients the following Friday in a facility that can provide care for them is pretty remarkable.
I remember there's one spot you can go to in the convention center where you kind of get a bird's eye view of everything, and you can kind of look on and you can see the 1,000 pods. I just remember watching all of that come together, and I think all of us kind of just feeling like, in a very small way, we help the city, we help the people in it try and get through something that, none of us in our wildest dreams could ever imagine.
The point here isn't that we built a field hospital in 6 days. The point is that this amazing group of people came together from all different fields and walks of life, put aside their own anxieties and fears about the situation and what was going on in the world, and did whatever it took to make this happen.
Boston Hope opened in April specifically to help treat people during the pandemic, and more than 700 COVID-19 positive patients were treated there over the past few months. Staff and volunteers and the patients themselves cheering and some crying tears of joy after victorious fights against COVID-19. 68-year-old Joseph Murphy of East Weymouth, he's one of the men there. He spent 36 days at Boston Hope, and that is something for sure to cheer about.